Today is Saturday, October 8th. It's that time of year when students are putting serious thought into where they might want to go to college. And one tool many use, college rankings lists, like the one U.S. News & World Report puts out each year. But this year, there are new questions and criticisms surrounding these highly influential lists. Last month, it came out that Columbia University submitted inaccurate information to U.S. News & World Report in previous years. Some of the data about small class sizes and the number of professors who hold advanced degrees were said to be better than they actually were in reality. Columbia admitted the error and chose not to submit data for this year's list while it does a larger review. And because of that, Columbia dropped from the number 2 slot to number 18. The controversy put a spotlight on the fact that rankings lists largely rely on info reported by the colleges themselves, and some say can be too easily manipulated. So today, we're getting insight from an expert on higher education. Josh Wyner is the founder and executive director of the College Excellence Program at the Aspen Institute. He leads the nonprofit's higher education reform efforts and has spent the past 2 decades working toward excellence and equity in student outcomes. He's sharing his thoughts on the value of college rankings and even whether college is worthwhile today at all. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the Newsworthy.
Happy to be here, Erica.
So some recent headlines about a mistake that was made in U.S. News & World Report highlighted some criticism that most college rankings lists actually come from self-reported data. What's your take on all of that?
The federal government prohibits colleges from gathering information about each student. When they enter, whether they get financial aid, whether they graduate, how much time they graduate, what their grade point average is, etc. That ban has been in effect for over a decade and hinders the ability of anybody, researchers, magazines ranking colleges, and others, policymakers, from really understanding fully what the outcomes are for students. So what happens is that when magazines or others want to rank colleges, they're stuck with either using imperfect federal data, data within their state, which often is also imperfect, or relying on colleges to report data. And that's really the source of the challenge that Columbia University faced and U.S. News & World Report faced, where a mistake was made by Columbia in reporting data. Had there been better federal data, arguably U.S. News & World Report would not have to have relied on what turned out to be a faulty submission.
What's the reasoning for that ban?
One of the stated reasons is privacy of students, although in my view, that's easily overcome by not allowing the federal government to report the data back out student by student and to report it out in the aggregate for different student groups within a college, freshmen, sophomores, Black students, Latinx students, etc. As long as those cell sizes, meaning the number of students in each of those groups, is more than 10 or 20 students, it's very hard for anybody to identify which student the data relate to. So the privacy concern strikes me as easily dealt with. I think a more cynical view is that higher education institutions themselves would rather not be held accountable for their outcomes. They, in fact, the lobby for higher education has consistently fought against enabling the federal government to gather more data in a student unit record system that would allow that kind of tracking to exist.
Do you think these lists are reliable in some way?
I think they're mostly reliable, yes. I don't know enough about how U.S. News & World Report fact checks the information that they gather. I'm assuming that this faulty reporting will cause them to re-examine how they check the information that comes into them. Even the federal data are self-reported. There will always be some self-reported data, and it's important that some details be provided by institutions. So I'm not worried that the lists themselves or the underlying data are inherently unreliable based on the challenge that was just unearthed in the example of Columbia University. I'm more interested in the question of what is being measured than the reliability of the data themselves.
What purpose do you think college rankings lists serve? And would you say there's a top pro and con for having them in the first place?
I think there are some real downsides to how these rankings are created. The real question is, are they any good? Are they measuring what it is that students, employers, and policymakers want to see? And if not, how do we change them? But I actually don't think the question is whether we like them or not. They're going to exist. There is a hunger for information about the quality of colleges and universities in this country, and the rankings are feeding that need. College costs a lot of money. And where you have 4,000 colleges, as we do in our country, each of which has, on average 100 or more different degree programs, people are going to want to know which is good and which isn't. And college education is deeply consequential in our country. If you have a college degree, you're much more likely to be able to earn a good living, and employers are much more likely to be able to rely on you to have the skills needed to be productive employees. So these are very consequential aspects of our society, products, if you will, that are put out into the world.
And I want to pick up on one thing you said, that college is consequential, that you are more likely to make a good living if you go to college. As more people question the purpose of going to college, what do you say to people who wonder if it's even worth it anymore?
Look at the data. After the 2008 recession, when people were questioning the value of college, it turns out that after the recession, the premium that college graduates earned was even higher than before the recession. The same is likely going to be true coming out of COVID. The drive towards automation in our society increases the value of knowledge, increases the value of analytic ability. It increases the value of some very technical skills in healthcare and information technology that are typically imparted by institutions of higher education. The Georgetown Center for Education and the Economy has regularly documented the increasing demand for a college education in order to get what they call a good job. That is a job that pays at least $35,000, $40,000 a year. That premium is going up. So people who doubt that need to only look at the data. I think they're ignoring the facts.
Still ahead, why are the top-ranked schools so much more expensive compared to the other options? And does the higher price tag necessarily mean better outcomes for students when they graduate? Josh Wyner explains what the data shows, what can be misleading about it all, and what he says students and parents should also consider when deciding which college is the best fit. But first, a quick break to thank our sponsors. The Newsworthy is brought to you by ZocDoc. At this point in a lot of our lives, trying to fit in one more thing onto our calendars can feel like a game of Battleship or Tetris. And that can be especially true trying to align with your doctor's office. I've experienced it many times. I call to make an appointment, and then it's 3 or more months before I can get in at a time that works for both of us. And now that I have a kid, I have to figure that all out for his appointments too. Well, ZocDoc helps make it easier to find and book an appointment with a doctor that suits your needs and your schedule. And ZocDoc is free. It's a free app that shows you doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, and are available when you need them. I also appreciate that you can read verified patient reviews. Every month, millions of people use ZocDoc, so simply go to ZocDoc.com/newsworthy and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then start your search for a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/newsworthy. ZocDoc.com/newsworthy. The Newsworthy is also brought to you by BetterHelp. I have faced plenty of times when things just don't seem to be going my way, and it's easy to get frustrated or feel like I'm giving up in those moments. But when I do find my own solution and even get creative if I have to, there's no better feeling. Well, a therapist can help in that process of becoming a better problem solver, no matter how big or small the task in front of you is. And perhaps even more importantly, a therapist can help you know how to deal with it even when there is no perfect solution. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is an option that is convenient, accessible, and affordable. It's entirely online. You can get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey, and then you can switch therapists anytime. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/newsworthy today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to my conversation with Josh Wyner. You also talked about the cost of these colleges and universities. The top 10 schools on this year's U.S. News and World Report list all cost more than $50,000 per year. Is that a coincidence?
It is not a coincidence that they are all charging an increasing amount of money. The cost associated with delivering a college education is going up. The primary expenditure that colleges have is personnel. It is faculty. And they're all competing for the best faculty they can get. Whether they're defining that in the right way or not, I'm not sure. But from their perspective, getting more top scholars in those colleges is the way to attract students and the way to attract additional dollars and to maintain prestige. If you then can attract the best students, they're the ones most likely to earn a lot of money, and they're going to give back to the college to fuel the endowment. And it's just a cycle that continues on and on and on. So it is not a coincidence. I don't think they're price fixing. I don't think they're all getting together and saying, what should the price of college be? But they are keeping an eye on what each other offers to try to figure out what they can offer. But let's be clear, that is really very few of the 4,000 schools fit that category of charging that kind of money. The average tuition for a state four-year college is $7,000 or $8,000 a year, but for a community college, it's closer to $4,000 a year. And so the numbers that we see for the top-ranked colleges do not reflect the reality that most people face.
Okay, so when it comes to return on investment, then, how do students who graduate from some of those top-ranked schools compare with students who graduate from some of the less expensive state schools or even community colleges?
Well, if you look in absolute terms at earnings and likelihood of employment and graduation rates, the top schools do better. But there's a question here, which is, are they delivering better results because they're taking students in who are more likely to be employed because they've had better preparation, are more likely to graduate because they come from wealthier families and life is less likely to stand in the way? Are they actually delivering better outcomes because they have huge endowments and can offer small class sizes and supports and residential experiences? And so I think we got to be very careful not to suggest that just because the outcomes from these highly selective colleges is better, that somehow the education that they offer is better. You've got to measure the inputs and the outputs. The real question is, what is the distance gained? How much was gained by a student from the time of entry to the time they left? If all you look at is what happens after they leave, and you don't account for what their educational background is and wealth before they arrived, you may be misled in regard to which colleges have the greater quality that would be reflected in the rankings.
Does that data exist?
There is peer grouping that can happen. We at the Aspen Institute do a fair amount of work trying to identify the colleges that achieve the highest and most equitable levels of student success. One of the things that's really important is to disaggregate data by race and ethnicity, to look at the programs of study entered, and to look at the wealth of the institution, the input factors in essence, and then to group like colleges and see which of them is achieving better outcomes. Unfortunately, the rankings by and large don't do that. They don't control for the inputs as well as they should. So I think they're giving a distorted picture.
So for any parents and students listening, as they are maybe looking to choose colleges and where to apply, what's your best advice? I mean, where should they be looking and what factors should they be looking at?
Well, I do think it matters to look at some absolute outcomes at the colleges, graduation rates, job placement among them. I think that those should be controlled for the diversity of the entering population. So if you find a college that is, let's say, 50% students who are on Pell Grants, and they have a 75% graduation rate, which is very high in our country, and then you see a college that only has 10% students on Pell Grants, these are low-income students, and they have an 85% graduation rate, I think you have to ask yourself the question, which college is better? I would argue the first one is better. I would argue that as a student who has a Pell Grant, I'm much more likely to be taken care of at that first college. I'm much more likely to feel a sense of community, and I'm much more likely to graduate, frankly. I think the other thing is, what kind of community do I want to enter? Do I want to enter a community of all wealthy students? Do I want to be learning alongside people with similar backgrounds, racially, ethnically, in terms of income level? Or do I think I'm going to get a higher quality education in a more diverse setting? So, what I would say is look at outcomes like graduation rates. And are those outcomes explained because the college only takes wealthy students in who are more likely to succeed anyway? Or is it something that the college did that I believe led to the success of students? I think that's the difficult question for folks, is to try to dig a little bit deeper and ask the question, given who's at this college, is this a community I want to be educated in and I want to be part of? Number one. And number two, what are the outcomes in light of the mix of students they have?
All right, thanks so much to Josh Wyner for joining us. If you know someone who might benefit from this conversation, be sure to share the show. And for more about the Aspen Institute's College Excellence Program, you can check out the website at highered.aspeninstitute.org. Don't forget, we provide the latest news stories you need to know about in just 10 minutes right here on the Newsworthy podcast every Monday through Friday. So we'll be back on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend.